Hello readers, I'm the Avid Reader and today we're reviewing Fourth Pillow, written by Harry Turtledove in 2006. So this is the first historical fiction book I'm reading by Harry Turtledove. I've read over 30 alternate history books, so this is a different genre technically, but it still has a similar writing style to Harry Turtledove's alternate history in general, especially his Civil War novels. So this is a historical fiction novel which takes place during the American Civil War in April 1864 with the Battle of Fort Pillow, which in reality was a battle where Confederates outnumbered the Federals, the Union members in the Civil War, and the battle turned into more of a massacre than an actual battle in war. So the Confederates committed a lot of war crimes during this time. And what's unique with this battle is that the Union garrison at Fort Pillow was about half black, half white. In this battle you actually got to see black Union soldiers fighting, and they showed that they were as good of soldiers as whites. And the other half of the Union garrison, they were Union members, Americans, Yankees, but they were what you call homemade Yankees, as they were from Tennessee. So during the Civil War, while most states sided completely with one side or the other, either Confederacy or the USA, there were three states where you had a lot of infighting: Missouri, Kentucky, and Tennessee. And this book takes place in Tennessee, so here you get to see the two factions of Tennessee. So you have the Tennessee Tories, the homemade Yankees, who back the United States, and then you have the regular Tennesseans who back the Confederacy, and both sides hate each other. And of course the Confederates hate blacks. They want them returned as slaves, they want them to be treated like property. They don't think that blacks have any business being soldiers. So I must say, out of all the standalone novels I've read by Harry Turtledove, and I've read 8 of them now, this is by far my favorite. So I'm gonna give a broad outline of the general story here. It's about 300 pages, so it's about half the size of some Harry Turtledove books. So of course this takes place in April of 1864 in Fort Pillow, Tennessee, and you have Nathan Bedford Forrest, who's a Confederate general who's very brutal, who comes with a flag of truce to the Union soldiers and basically say, we outnumber you badly, surrender and we will treat all your soldiers well, or else. The commanding officer at Fort Pillow was killed earlier in the morning, Major Booth, so now Major Bradford is in charge. And Bradford refuses. Remember, this is about 600 Union guys against, I think, about a couple thousand Confederates. So Forrest orders the attack. The actual real battle only lasts for half an hour or so. A lot of Union guys fight bravely, whites as well as blacks. And you do have perspectives from all sides in this book, so you follow a black Union soldier, you follow several white Union officers, and you also follow several Confederate officers and soldiers, and you get their perspective on things in general. But after most of the real battle is done, you have a lot of Union people who try to surrender, but the Confederates, instead of letting them surrender, outright kill them. So a lot of American soldiers, both white and black, although blacks are overrepresented, are just shot outright or bayoneted. So there is a sizable proportion of Union guys who do get taken prisoner, but there's also a sizable amount who just get massacred outright. And these guys are defenseless. They dropped their guns, threw up their arms and surrendered, but the Confederates shot them anyways, because these are either blacks, which Confederates hate in generals, or Tennesseans, who the Confederates view as traitors. And Nathan Bedford Forrest, he's not in the battle himself, he just aloof, withdrawn, and lets the Confederates do what they want. Major Bradford, although he's shot around, successfully surrenders, and he gives his parole to a Confederate colonel that he won't run away, and he asks to bury his brother. So now most of the killing has ended, and the Confederate officers go around and say there's been enough killing. There was a gunboat, by the way, at Fort Pillow, which was providing protection, but they just left when the Confederates shot too much at them. Some Union guys do get taken prisoner, and Bradford is burying his dead brother, who's also a Union officer. He pretends to get drunk with the Confederate soldier who's guarding him, but the Confederate soldier drinks much more than Bradford, so he falls asleep. So Bradford changes uniform, puts on some ragged, oversized civilian clothes, and leaves. And he tricks a couple of Confederates in letting him pass by. And then you have the Confederates who realize what has happened, and they decide they're gonna try to capture Bradford the day afterwards. And now that Bradford has broken his word, he can be summarily executed if he's caught. And you have an American ship who passes by on the Mississippi River, and the Confederates propose a truce where the Americans can take their wounded, and the Americans agree. The majority of the wounded who are rescued are white, although some blacks are rescued. Bradford eventually gets captured, and they find out his true identity, that he's not some ragged civilian, but actually the major who broke his word. On the way to meet Nathan Bedford Forrest on the journey there, the Confederate soldiers just take him into the woods and kill him and claim that he tried to escape. And the Confederate officers know that this is probably a lie, but they let it go. And back at the field hospital, where Union soldiers who are wounded but were rescued were brought, you have the US Congressional Joint Committee on the Conduct of the War, where you have a congressman and a senator who shows up, and they start questioning different American soldiers who were at Fort Pillow to know what happened, as they're gonna make this a propaganda piece, a rallying cry of saying, look at what happened to Fort Pillow to our poor guys. Now we're gonna pay the Confederates back. And that's the book. The Confederates won this battle under Nathan Bedford Forrest, but in the end they lost the war. So, how would I rate Fort Pillow? I'm gonna give it a 10 out of 10. And if you're interested in reading Harry Turtledove, I would wholeheartedly recommend this novel. This is one of my favorite novels of all time, I would probably say. Some of his Southern Victory books are better overall, but apart from that, this is among his best written stuff. And this isn't even alternate history, this is just historical fiction. And there are a lot of amazing things about this book. You have the classic Harry Turtledove humor that makes you laugh. You have also some great action scenes that are fun to read, as Harry Turtledove is good at writing. But you also have some heart-wrenching moments that just disgust you. How the brutality of war, or the brutality of war crimes, and also the way that people just hate blacks in this novel. It's disgusting. Things like the N-word are used a lot in this novel, as this is supposed to be a realistic portrayal of how Americans and Confederates view blacks. And even the whites who fought along blacks initially were skeptical of the blacks and looked down upon them, but they did so less after the battle. But the Confederates till the end really hates the blacks in this book, and you can see it in their actions and in how they speak. But it also offers a nuanced perspective, as Nathan Bedford Forrest, the Confederate general, he is one of the most brutal Confederate officers, but you see that he's not just uniformly bloodthirsty, he has some principles. So no one is purely evil or purely good in this novel. But you still understand from this novel that the Confederates are in a sense worse than the Americans in this conflict overall. So overall, an amazing read, 10 out of 10. Should you read this novel? Definitely. Of all the historical fiction novels I've read, this is my favorite, I'd say. Maybe it's just because I love the way that Harry Turtledove writes about the American Civil War. He writes in such an intriguing, gripping way about the American Civil War. And if you're interested in learning about another Harry Turtledove novel, then I would recommend you to check out my book review of 3 Miles Down, Harry Turtledove's newest novel, which is a story of first contact between humans and aliens during the Nixon era, Watergate 1970s. Anyways, I'm the avid reader, and I will see you readers next time.